We hit 10,000 subscribers. We're going to tell you more about that special celebration that we're going to throw together with some special prizes for you guys. Thank you so much for getting us to 10,000 subscribers. We'll tell you more about that, but we're going to get into Vegas here in a second. Welcome to the Week 9 episode of the Footballguys Daily Fantasy Power Grid presented by DraftKings. John, tell us, what is Vegas telling us about Week 9?
Vegas is telling us that Week 9 is going to be a low-scoring DFS week, I think. Not a whole lot to talk about this week. The Seattle Seahawks are the only 3-star offense on the Vegas value chart. They're playing Tampa Bay and their pass funnel defense. We'll talk a little bit about the attraction around Russell Wilson, the resultant DFS ownership across the industry on him. And then after that, it's a pretty big fallout. You've got a little bit of Oakland, believe it or not. Oakland has the second highest team total on the main slate this week at 26 points, playing Detroit, who's kind of got this rejuvenated pass-happy offense. I don't know whether I'm buying, but at least it looks that way. And after that, we have a series of 4 road favorites. The Green Bay Packers playing at the Chargers, Minnesota playing Matt Moore, leading the Kansas City Chiefs. New England, perhaps they should be favorites against Baltimore. And then we're going back to Detroit at Oakland. So it's interesting. There's only a total of 7 teams on the Vegas value chart this week. And typically what I do there is any team above 24 points is worth talking about. And so I think this is an interesting week. We've got a few more bye weeks this week. We've got a game in London that's going to take a game off the charts. And so it's going to be limited in terms of where we go. And, I'll start with where I finish. I think this week going contrarian is going to be the key to winning tournaments. Not so sure about cash games, but I think this week, more so than others, is going to be a lot of overlap in ownership. And so stay tuned to find out where we think some of that diversity can be obtained in tournament formats.
This is one of my favorite kind of weeks. I love it when there's low totals and it's a little bit trickier. Ryan, talk to me about quarterbacks that you like this week. We've got a couple of injuries here. Joe Flacco is out. Mahomes looks like he's not going to play. That's about it we're looking at. What do you got, Ryan?
Yeah, none of that's incredibly newsworthy, of course. So moving to the top of the chart, Russell Wilson is the one that is the top of the ownership projections, right? So he's got the great on-paper matchup against Tampa, hosting Tampa. He's up there, but he's a cash game play. I mean, 18% is very, very high for a typically levelized position. But in cash, he seems like the safest guy. And I think there are some lower-priced options to discuss here at other positions that you could fit Russell Wilson in.
Devin disagreed with the first pick out of the gate. That's classic Devin. Classic Devin.
It has been like 3 weeks since I got a red Black Eye Joe from Devin mid-speech. So I'm glad you're back, Devin. I'm glad glad we're here. I'm glad we're doing the normal thing.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So outside of Wilson, in the same game, $1,000 cheaper on DraftKings is Jameis Winston. Always hard to trust in cash because there's a 4-interception game and possibly a benching lurking. But Seattle allows a lot of fantasy points too. We're far from the Legion of Boom days. So Jameis Winston's another one. And then if you wanted to go, really cheap, Matt Moore is still under 5K. He's still going to start for Kansas City in a home game. He looked adequate or better, depending on how you viewed the game Sunday night. And the Minnesota defense isn't quite as good as what we're used to them being. So with Austin's strength of schedule tool, we see that Minnesota is actually 19th in normalized strength of schedule against quarterbacks and 22nd against wide receivers. So a little bit easier against the pass than they have it in recent memory.
John liked those picks so much he decided to step away. He's like, Ryan just covered it all. Devin.
Sorry for my stuttering, but I saw John leave and I wondered if we were going to stop. Let's not stop.
Nope, we're not stopping. Devin, you didn't really care for that Russell Wilson pick. Tell me why and tell me who you do like.
I just don't like the price. So we're going to get to running backs in a minute, and there's some high-end running backs that are in really good spots this week. So the problem I have with Wilson primarily is that as a cash game play, he has that volume that always concerns me, where over the last 2 weeks we've seen it where he's only thrown for 241 yards and he threw for 182 yards, both in pretty good matchups against Baltimore and Atlanta. So this is a team that wants to run the ball.
And Devin's internet hung up. John texted me and he said he lost power. Hey, John agreed with that Russell Wilson pick, so we know he liked that one. So it's 2 against 1 there. Devin, looks like you're back. Tell me again what you were saying there.
This show's going off the rails, but I was saying for Wilson, the volume is just a problem. So it's a run-based offense that is it's not really trustworthy. He's had 2 good matchups 2 consecutive weeks. He threw for 241 yards against Baltimore and then 180 against Atlanta. That to me is concerning, that if they get a lead against this Tampa Bay defense, that they could just run the ball the entire game. 2 guys that I do like this week in cash, Matthew Stafford. So Oakland has allowed 8 touchdowns over the last 2 games, 429 yards to Aaron Rodgers, 279 yards to Deshaun Watson. The other guy that I do like this week is going down a little bit. Phillip Rivers on DraftKings is only 5,100, and Green Bay has allowed 330 yards average over the last 4 weeks. So this secondary that started off really well is sort of struggling a little bit, and they're they can be passed on. And how are the Chargers going to move the ball? And that's the question I typically like to ask myself when I'm building a cash lineup. Is it's a matchup in which Melvin Gordon has been terrible. I think we can all recognize that, and they're going to have to move it some way, and that's through Austin Eckler and Keenan Allen. And maybe they should sign Josh Gordon, but he won't. Even if they do, he won't be ready this week. Mike Williams is there. It's a pass. It needs to be a pass-heavy offense because they're not moving the ball on the ground.
Yep. Yeah, I like that. They get 80% of their yards via the pass, which is the 3rd highest. So that is a good call, and he is so cheap. With the Wilson thing, Devin, though, do you buy into the narrative that it was kind of a bit of a mercy killing last week with Dan Quinn in Atlanta being a former colleague of Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll not wanting to necessarily run it up on his old guy?
No, I don't think that
is a reason why. I mean, they didn't have to pass, right? So
I think it's a team that when they don't have to pass, they don't want to pass. I think Carroll would rather run the ball 35 times and just get out of there with a win than having. I don't buy into the narrative that.
I'm not so sure they can do that against Tampa, though. And so Tampa is a bit of a pass funnel, which makes me like Wilson a bit more. But you're right, the price is high. So the other one that we didn't mention, and I'll just take John's place here. I don't know if he was going to say this, but I think we have 30 more seconds since he's not here.
Sure.
On the other side of the Matt Stafford game, Derek Carr's one to look at too. So Detroit has been getting throttled by opposing passing games. They're 30th in fantasy points allowed, and they're 27th in normalized. So they're bad no matter how you look at it. And I like Derek Carr more as a GPP play than a cash play, but he is in the mid-5s on DraftKings. So he's somebody that I'm looking at this week, especially, even from a season-long perspective. He's available on all kinds of waiver wires, and you can get him, and I think he has QB1 potential this week.
One more guy, Mitchell Trubisky's only 5K.
Yeah.
He's playing for his job. I mean, it really, the Bears really need to determine whether or not they're going to invest in him long-term. And at 5,000 against this Philly defense that has struggled against they've been like I've said the past couple of weeks, they've been awesome against awesome against the run and terrible against the pass. So it's not a cash game play. It's more of a GPP play. But if there was ever a game for Trubisky to right the ship a little bit, this could be the week.
I imagine his ownership will be pretty low. The matchup helps for sure. So John lost power. He may jump back in later, but we're going to do the 3-man show until
three-man weave
finds his way back in. Let's talk about running backs. But first, be sure to check out our mid-season subscription deals. We lowered our prices mid-season. If you are not a subscriber yet, we've got some pretty cheap prices for you over at footballguys.com. Check it out. Let's talk about running backs. I think the Steelers running back situation is the one we're keeping our eye on here. I'll pass it to you, Ryan, actually. Tell us what you know about that situation and whether it opens up anything interesting or maybe a different running back that you like.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it's a short week, and they were playing James Conner at the end of the game, even though they didn't need to. He seemed like he dinged up his shoulder. He hasn't practiced either day this week. The team says he can play without practicing, but if he doesn't practice again Friday, I'm not liking his chances. Dr. Gene, who's smarter at this than I will ever be, says that Benny Snell will be out and James Conner will likely be out. So we're now down to Jalen Samuels, who is also coming off of an injury, but he practiced in full last week leading up to the Monday night game, and they just decided to hold him out just because precautionary. I don't know. But he did practice in full. He was questionable. People thought he would play and then ultimately did not. So in theory, he's the only healthy guy this week, and he's 4,000 on DraftKings. We've seen that he's a versatile player who can catch passes, so he provides salary relief. If you are one that wants to go up and play a Russell Wilson, a quarterback, or a high-priced tight end perhaps, or jam in, one or two of the 7,500 plus running backs, Samuels is a guy that I'm looking at. It's not the greatest of matchup against Indy, but I do think opportunity, per dollar, he's one of the guys that we need to look at just because of his price.
Devin, what do you think about Samuels, and do you have maybe like a pricey running back you like and maybe like a cheaper running back you like?
Yeah, the matchup isn't great for Samuels, would be my only concern. But on DraftKings, he's more of he's a big running back, but he plays more like a receiving back. He was a tight end in college. I think on DraftKings he's playable. On FanDuel, I'm not so sure, but he's a guy that if Connor does end up being out is interesting. I have a couple guys on my list, and with the time that we have, I think that I'll go through these fairly quickly. Dalvin Cook's my top guy on the board, and I know it's tough because Christian McCaffrey has been so good, and the problem with McCaffrey is that Tennessee's run defense has been really good too, but McCaffrey's matchup proof. The only difference between the two for me is the price. So Dalvin Cook going up against Kansas City, which I've talked about all year. They've given up the most points to running backs since week 5. They've given up 94 or more yards to all running backs except one this year. So it's a prime matchup. Minnesota's going to want to run the ball for the entire game, and the matchup really couldn't be any better. Nick Chubb is a guy that I'm looking at. So I think in the same regards of just being matchup proof, Nick Chubb
the Browns, he said. Don't play the Browns, he said. I'm just kidding. I like him too. I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So this Browns team, I think I've been more right than wrong in that they were going to be disappointing this year. But Chubb has been the one bright spot, and Denver's pass defense is just as good as. I don't want to say just as good, but it's up there with San Francisco and New England for the 3 best in the league. So Baker Mayfield's really had a very difficult schedule the last 3 out of the last 4 weeks, and Chubb's just keeps producing, and his price on DraftKings is 7,300. Compared that to 10,000 for McCaffrey or 9,500 for Cook. It's not an ideal matchup. Denver's run defense has been okay, but the only path to success for Cleveland is running the ball through Nick Chubb. He's almost a lock for 18 to 20 touches, and they're facing Brandon Allen, who's starting for Joe Flacco. So they should win the game in theory. If not, Freddie Kitchens is going to be fired. But they have to win. So he's a guy I'm looking at, and they've given up a couple big games before. They gave up 220. Denver did. They gave up 225 yards to Leonard Fournette, 85 and 2 to Josh Jacobs. Speaking of Josh Jacobs, that's the next guy on my list. So Detroit, we've talked about the last couple of shows, is that their running backs have struggled as well. They've given up 125 yards or more to 4 of the last 5 running backs. So Jacobs is in a pretty good spot at 6,500. I'm a little salty about Jacobs because I have a lot of money on Kyler Murray winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year, and I don't think that that's going to happen because Jacobs has been outstanding this year. He's been one of the main reasons that Oakland has performed as well as they have, and they're the second highest scoring, which scoring offense, which John mentioned. And then Jordan Howard, revenge game, assuming Miles Sanders is banged up. I think he's going to play, but Howard is going up against a Bears defense that really has not been the same since they lost Akeem Hicks. And Akeem Hicks is the big body right end opposite of Khalil Mack that kind of just eats space and lets the linebackers work. So, since week 5 with Hicks out, the Bears have actually allowed the third most points to opposing running backs, averaging 105 yards and 2 touchdowns to the position. And go ahead.
And that includes 8 carries for 31 yards to Melvin Gordon last week.
Correct.
So, they shut down the Chargers, but the Chargers shut down the Chargers. Go ahead.
Correct. And Howard's coming off a 23 carry, 96-yard performance with a touchdown against the Bills. I like him more on FanDuel just because he's not going to catch 4 or 5 passes, so he does lose out a little bit on the PPR angle, but I think he's in a pretty good spot this week to take advantage, especially in GPPs where people are going to be off of them because there's still this stigma around the Bears' vaunted defense of last year, which that's no longer the case. Just looking through my list if there's any other guys.
Should we talk about Mark Walton at all? I mean, Kenyon Drake was traded away from the Dolphins. Mark Walton's dirt cheap. I'm not saying owning a Dolphin feels comfortable, but man, is he cheap and he's going to start here. What do you think,
On
Ryan?
DraftKings, he's cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd rather play Jalen Samuels. I even though it is a Mason Rudolph-led team, I trust that team better. Without the Samuels, Walton was interesting, but I still am doing everything I can to avoid it.
Yeah.
My notes for Walton are literally a question mark. So I was just going to kind of ask that to the group, and now that the group is smaller, I don't know what to do with it. But I think if Samuels is the only guy in Pittsburgh, I think kind of that's the answer, and his ownership will go up and Walton's will go down as a consequence of that. But I think that's probably the right thing. I mean, that's what should happen.
Yeah.
I have one more guy to talk about, but since we're on Walton, if Devin, if you have a thought, because he is a guy that keeps popping up on our IVCs and projections, so I think people are going to see him and want to know what to do.
If you have to save money in cash and play Samuels and Walton, fine. But
you really don't have to do both, though, do you? I mean,
both.
If you went Russell Wilson and Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey, I think you couldn't do that, but
exactly.
If it was like fantasy draft where you can play 4 running backs in cash, then maybe.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd rather go Royce Freeman, who's a little bit more expensive, and I'd rather go Jalen Samuels, who's less.
Yeah. I tend to
Philip
agree.
Lindsay's dealing with a wrist injury, which is he was a limited practice, but the concern there is he had wrist surgery in the offseason. So how many carries is he going to see? And Cleveland's run defense has been terrible. So Freeman's interesting to me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of perception around Lindsey as the pass catching back out of those two, but that team has used those guys pretty interchangeably. And Royce Freeman actually has a higher target share than Philip Lindsay, if I'm not mistaken. So don't think that he's just the ground and pound guy in that offense. I mean, they pretty much split it down the middle, and they split it by drive, not by roll. The one last guy I wanted to talk about was Derrick Henry, though. So normally I am far from a Derrick Henry guy, but because he's a one-dimensional player. But just it's a matchup GPP play only because Carolina allows 5 yards a carry, which is the second highest in the league. They only allow 5.2 net yards per pass attempt, which is the third fewest. So you can't throw against them, you can run against them. Fifth fewest passing yards a game allowed, sixth most rushing yards a game allowed. Much better on normalized strength of schedule versus the passing positions, QB, wide receiver, tight end, than they are in terms of defense versus position. And they also allow a 66.7% red zone touchdown rate, which is the fourth worst. So, you've got a team that allows teams to run and move the ball and then allows touchdowns once they get in the red zone, and they also allow them via the run. So it's very, very game flow dependent, though, as Henry always is. So I don't recommend it in cash, but he's somebody that if he ended up with 100 yards and a touchdown this week, I would be far from shocked.
And Devin, you didn't really care for that pick. And I was going to come back to you and ask, you mentioned off the top some pretty high-priced running backs in Cook and Chubb. So I was going to ask you, is your cash build looking like you're going to put in kind of spend up at running back and get 2 expensive running backs here?
As of right now, yes. I want especially in DraftKings. I think realistically you could get 60 points between the 2 running backs. I think both McCaffrey and Cook are as safe, and we're going to get into wide receivers in a minute. But has there been a receiver that's been that great all year that you have to force him in besides Chris Godwin? And we'll talk about that in a minute. But there hasn't been a safe receiver to pay up for in cash seemingly all year.
Which is weird because I feel like last year there was like a handful of guys that you're like, I really want to pay up for these guys.
You had Hopkins, you had Antonio Brown, you had these guys, and Hopkins isn't the same volume guy, and I don't think he's on his slate. So
he's in that London game.
Right.
Correct.
Adam Thielen's the most expensive guy, and he's banged up. So it's like there's not really that guy that I want to pay up for at receiver.
So one last guy we did not talk about in the vein of the expensive running backs, or maybe you did mention him, and if you did, Devin, I'm sorry, but Le'Veon Bell, right? So what are you doing? What are you doing there? I mean, that's another guy. He's not quite as high as Cook, but he's a little bit more than Chubb. But boy, the volume's certainly there, and now the matchup, kind of meets that. So I'm having a hard time not playing him, but like we said, there's 5 running backs I want to play, and I just can't do it.
Here's the problem with Bell. A lot of his value is as a receiver, right?
Yep.
He has 5 receptions in his last 3 games since Sam Darnold came back. Yeah. I don't know what to make of that. When we saw Luke Falk there, he had 21 receptions in 3 games. And since Darnold has come back, it's almost like he's staying in the block. I don't have routes run numbers, but he's not really the guy in that offense.
He still had 4 and 5 targets the last 2 weeks, but it is a good point. Yeah.
So if I'm paying up for Le'Veon Bell, I need that 5 to 7 to 8 reception upside, and I'm not so sure it's there right now.
Good point.
Which is surprising because pretty much his whole career that's been there, and it isn't right now for some reason. All right, let's move on to wide receivers. Please use the YouTube comments to shout at John and scream about his power not working. He likes that kind of thing. Or tell us which of these picks you like and which ones you don't. We appreciate all the thoughts that you guys add to the comments. And let's talk about wide receivers. There's 2 guys we're looking at. Devontae Adams, Adam Thielen. Looks like Adams is going to go. Looks like Thielen might go too, but those are the 2 big names we're keeping an eye on this week.
I'd say Adams is very much 50-50.
You think so?
All right. Matt LaFleur came out and said, it's a very serious injury. We're going to take our time, even though he's practicing. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. Do they need to bring him out there this week? I don't know. But
against the Chargers, they could probably win without him.
And they're 7-1. So it's in that division. The Bears have been a disappointment. The Lions have been a disappointment. The Vikings are pretty good, but is it a must win? I think they'd rather not risk Adams a long-term injury. So if he's active, I think he's going to play. I don't think that there's a situation where he's extremely limited. Where
he's not a decoy.
He's not a decoy type guy anyways. If he's there, you're thrown to him.
Yeah.
He's not a guy that's only going to see 30 to 40% of the snaps.
Yeah. He's either in or he's out. Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you think, Devin? Who do you like this week?
First guy that pops off the list for me on DraftKings is DJ Moore. And at 4,800, he's a volume guy that he's seen 27 targets over the last 3 weeks. So on DraftKings, I think I've mentioned I'm looking to spend down in cash. At 4,800, it's probably one of the safest plays in that range to get that 8 to 9 targets that he's gotten. And Tennessee, we talked about them earlier, but their run defense is incredibly solid. So it's a defense that you're going to have to throw on a little bit. I'll save Deontay Johnson for Ryan, as I'm sure that he has some thoughts there. My favorite GPP play going with Mitchell Trubisky is Allen Robinson. So Philly has given up the most fantasy points this year to opposing running wide receivers. And surprisingly, Robinson continues to produce, even though that this offense has been terrible. He has 3 touchdowns over the last 3 games, averaging about 85 yards and He has 22 catches over the last 3 games. So he's their entire offense at the moment. And his price, it's 6,800 on DraftKings, and on FanDuel it is 7,200. So I do like him a little bit more on FanDuel just because I think he probably scores a touchdown in this game. But those are the two right off the bat. I'm also going back to Cortland Sutton, especially on FanDuel. He was okay last week, not what we really wanted with Emmanuel Sanders being traded, but he was the only guy that actually had more than, I think it was 5 targets. So all the other receivers, Deshaun Hamilton had 1 target. What's the guy's name? Tim Patrick had 2 or 3 targets. There's really not much else in Denver. So if you think that Cleveland's going to win this game, how is Denver going to move the ball? Probably on the run to begin, but I think Sutton still has GPP upside in this game. He's a deep play threat that can get behind a defense. I also like Kenny Golladay. I talked about Matt Stafford and all of Oakland's problems over the last couple of weeks. They got shredded by DeAndre Hopkins, who caught basically everything last week. So that's kind of where I'm starting. I'll let Ryan jump in with his guys, and then I'll jump back in.
Yeah, it sounds good. Ryan, who do you like? Uh-oh, Ryan's muted.
Muted, like a conference call in a corporate environment. I'm talking on mute. So anyways, now I'm back. I was doing a little Deontay Johnson number digging because Devin prompted me, so I didn't catch all of his picks. But it is worth noticing, and I did look at this but didn't write it down earlier. But Deontay Johnson with Mason Rudolph was averaging 12.7 PPR points a game versus 4.4 without. And that's even a little misleading because that includes the Baltimore game that Rudolph got knocked out during. Granted, he did play, into the second half of that game. So it's a pretty significant split. He's doing well. And Juju Smith-Schuster is also doing well, even though, I know the expectations were very high and he seems to be an underwhelming player this season. He has 75 yards or more in 5 of his last 7 games, and he has a touchdown in 3 of his last 5. So I'm not recommending him in cash, far from it. I think he's a GPP play, though, as just a guy who could very easily, put up 100 yards and or a touchdown in any given game. He's getting, he played 6 quarters with Ben Roethlisberger as the wide receiver 1. So I'm still very much a Juju apologist in saying that he can be a wide receiver 1 in the NFL and is one. He just doesn't have a legitimate quarterback at the moment. But that team is improving, and so is the situation. I do agree with the DJ Moore call. I in the last few weeks have been citing some fantasy points from touchdowns kind of stats, and he is the 4th lowest among receivers in terms of his the percentage of his fantasy points that come from touchdowns. So I like DJ Moore as well. Going even cheaper, the Jets receivers are worth looking at here too. So Demaryius Thomas is $4,000, and I was kind of surprised just even 3 weeks ago to see him show up on so high on our projections. But I think our guys again were a little bit ahead of the curve. I mean, he's seeing a lot more volume than people think. So he's only 4,000. But the one I like even better there, and it's a little less safe, of course, especially due to the price, is Robbie Anderson. So Miami's 30th in normalized strength of schedule against quarterbacks. They're 30th against receivers, 18th in defense first position. So they're even worse than we think. And 26.5% of pass attempts against Miami are deep balls, which is the highest percentage. So if you did watch the Monday night snooze fest, which I unfortunately did, they play a lot of man coverage down the rails, so it's just a lot of deep balls down the perimeter over and over again. We know Robbie Anderson can catch those and run after the catch. He leads the team in average depth of target, so I like him there a little bit. The only argument against paying down at receiver this week to me is Tyler Lockett, and I guess I know that Devin is not on the Seattle passing game, but Lockett is just, boy, the guy is so remarkably consistent. I think dating back to last year, including the playoff game, 10 of his last 11 games, he's 75 yards and or a touchdown. So remarkable consistency there, and he's the guy Russell Wilson looks to the most. I think you covered most of the guys on my list, Devin, as well.
Yeah, so Lockett
Allen, did you say Keenan Allen?
So let's talk about Lockett for a second. Sure. 7,500 on DraftKings.
It's high. It's very high.
You have Chris Godwin at 73 and Mike Evans at 72.
Yeah, I think his price makes him GPP, but boy, How surprised are we going to be if he puts up huge numbers? Like, I'm not going to be shocked. I'm going to be kicking myself for not trying to find a way.
But he's only gone over 100 yards twice this year. He's that guy that, to me, finishes every game 70 to 80 yards and scores a touchdown about 50% of the games, catches somewhere between 5 and 6 passes. That's a lot of salary.
You're right. It's a cash game profile, but a GPP price.
I mean, right? You're hoping for the game against the Saints where he had 11 for 154 and a touchdown.
Yeah.
That's what you're hoping for.
Yep. It's true.
It's hard. The matchup's good. If they fall behind, it's even better. It's a lot. Yeah. So I'm going to take John's spot here, and I'm going to mention a white slot receiver that is not named Trey Quinn or whoever the Buffalo guy is. Cole Beasley. So the guy that I'm looking at is Danny Amendola. Wow. And it's sort of under the radar, but if you look at his last 2 games, 8 for 105 against the Vikings, 8 for 95 against the Giants. Going up against Oakland, I talked about Stafford. I talked about how I do think he's a great play this week, especially as a GPP. I think I'm going Rivers and cash, but Danny Amendola I don't want to say safe because he also has a 1 for 6 game the game before that. So it's a little bit of point chasing. It's a lot of bit of point chasing, but if I'm paying down in cash, he's a guy that I want shares of the Lions passing attack. And I can't afford Galladay. I do like him as a GPP play, but Amendola is a guy that, you don't feel good about clicking his name, but the last 2 weeks have shown that he has some floor that is maybe improving. I mean, he missed time against the Packers games. That's why I kind of throw it out, as he got injured. He missed a little bit of time, kind of eased back into the offense. Could he be a guy who is a possession type receiver that we've seen in the past? Maybe.
Seems risky.
Yeah, but risky. It also gets me Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey, which makes me feel really good.
That's fair. But you feel better about DJ Moore, obviously. He's a cash game play that gets you some salary relief.
I'm playing both of them.
Yeah. So that you can load up at running back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's that kind of week.
I mean, right now I have DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, and Danny Amendola as my receivers. Doesn't make me feel good, but the 2 names above it in Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey make me feel really, really strong.
Did you mention Alshon Jeffrey, Devin?
I did not.
Any thoughts? I mean, he's a wide receiver 1 and he's $5,000, and we're talking in 5,000 or less.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's not the narrowest target tree in Philadelphia, but I don't think I've ever seen him that cheap, so it caught my eye.
Yeah, I mean, Chicago has been okay against the pass, not great, but not terrible. Yeah. But they have had some struggles against wide receiver 1s. Michael Thomas lit them up. Stephon Diggs, if you call him a number 1. Adam Thielen struggled, but had over 100 yards. Emmanuel Sanders had 11 for 98 and a touchdown. So it's I don't know if I can go there in cash, but as a GPP play, I think he's going to want to score a touchdown against his former team.
So for 300, you feel better about Amendola than you do about Jeffrey. Is that 300 that big of a deal?
Yeah, I see where you're going there, Ryan, because I was thinking, man, I'd feel better about Jeffrey. Not that I feel great about either one, but I think I'd feel better about Jeffrey.
Yeah, so.
I don't know. Check my article on Saturday on footballguys.com.
300 can make a difference. Like, it can. I'm not trying to make it insignificant, but.
The target share is so narrow there, right? Yeah, so I think Amendola's floor is higher.
Really?
Man, he's got 3 solid games, but man, his floor is. All right, let's not spend too much time on Amendola. Check Devin's article. He's going to think through it a little bit more.
I post my entire cash game article on footballguys.com. So
yeah, your cash game lineup on there. Yeah. Yep.
Mid-season subscription still available.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Hey, any other receiver talk before I talk about our big 10K subscriber celebration?
Godwin or Evans?
Oh yeah, we got to pick.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not the the cornerback matchup guy, and that guy lost his power earlier. So I'm kind of not sure on that. I don't know. It's tough. I want to play one of them.
I mean, they're both in great spots. So as part of Football Guys, we do about a 20,000 word weekly matchup, which breaks down every game. And really, they're both in great spots. But the one thing to call out is Godwin should have, I don't want to say the better matchup, but the worry I have about Mike Evans is that they will put Shaquille Griffin on him, which Griffin is I think he could potentially shadow him, where Jamar Taylor has really struggled.
Oop, we lost Devin. Internet issues.
You could really play either one. Yeah. So
gotcha. But it sounded like you had an ever so slight leaning towards Godwin here.
Correct, because he's not gonna face as much Shaquille Griffin.
Yep.
It's wildly unscientific, but last week was Evans week. This week should be Godwin week.
Flip a coin.
Yeah, exactly.
That's not what the listeners want to hear. They want to say, you want to play Godwin. He's got the slightly better matchup.
I like hearing the matchup talk there.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about how we're going to celebrate us getting 10,000 subscribers. Thank you guys, the listeners, the watchers, for subscribing. Here's what we got. We are going to post a Google form link at the top of our show description. So on YouTube, make sure that you see the link there. Go to the link, enter your email and your name, and you'll be entered into a contest, a random drawing for the following prizes. We will be giving away 5 All-Pro subscriptions that will take you through next year in terms of your subscription to footballguys.com. And we will be giving away...
It's like $100 value.
Yeah, exactly. And we'll be giving 3 30-minute one-on-one DFS consultations.
Priceless.
Priceless, exactly. Devin, John have offered to give a little one-on-one advice here to 3 different people, and we will be giving away 1 prize of Football Guys swag. So if you like, the Black-Eyed Joe that's kind of hanging out over my shoulder, we'll be sending you some swag if you win that prize. So please enter your email, enter your name, and we will get those prizes out in the next couple of weeks. And look for that form in the top of the show notes. So thank you again for getting us there. That's huge. We're very thankful. Let's talk about tight ends. Ryan. Devin. Let's talk about tight ends. That's what I said, Devin. Yeah. And I don't have any real significant injuries here on the tight end list, but let me know if I've overlooked something. Devin, what do you got?
Tight end's tough. So it's I think if you want safe, you should go Darren Waller. He's been Oakland's the second highest projected scoring team. Like we talked about, Waller has been a big part of this offense, and I think that he's in a fairly good spot this week, going up against a linebacking group in Detroit that has struggled. I'm not going there. I'm going cheap, and I've talked about it for most of the show. I think that it's a position. It's a position that's tough. I mean, Waller did struggle last week, so he still had 8 targets, but Dallas Goedert's the guy that I'm going with. And John mentioned him last week, and Goedert is doing just as well as Zach Ertz. Goedert has scored in, I think, 3 of the last 4 games, and he's only 3,100 on DraftKings. It's a risk, but he's averaging four receptions over the last 3 games. There's a reason they took this guy as high as they did. They want to factor in both Ertz and Goedert. It doesn't make me feel good, but he's the guy that I'm looking at in cash at the moment. If I have salary, I'm going and I'm spending up. I'm going Waller in cash. Hunter Henry in GPP is just because we talked about Rivers earlier. It's a matchup in which they're going to have to move the ball through the air because they can't run the ball. And Hunter Henry has looked great since he came back. So tight end's a tough position this week. There's not that guy that you really trust. I mean, Kelsey, once Mahomes gets back, I think we'll get back there. But he scored a touchdown last week, and if any indication gives you that he's not going to score one for the next couple, because he really hasn't been that consistent in the red zone. Going all the way down, dark GPP play, Noah Fant. So Noah Fant, rookie tight end with a inexperienced quarterback, which we've seen focus in on the tight end. And with no Emmanuel Sanders, they're going to have to find a second option outside of Cortland Sutton. So Fant at 3,000 is a guy that I'm looking at as a GPP play.
Devin, before we move on to Ryan's tight end picks here, it sounds like you're going so running back heavy that you're playing way down at both receiver and tight end. Do you think you're going to see that style of build from a lot of cash game players this week, or do you think you're stepping a little bit out on an island there?
I don't know if you'll see. So I think there will be two approaches. I think people will either go with Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
Or they will go one of Dalvin Cook and Christian McCaffrey and Nick Chubb and Josh Jacobs. And they will get all three of those running backs because of the safeness that we've talked about, which there are no safe receivers. I mean, you could talk Chris Godwin, which is safe, Tyler Lockett's safe, yada, 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 but
they're expensive too, though.
They're expensive, and they're the same price as Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and Chris Carson.
And at running back, the one saving grace that people may go to is Jalen Samuels, just because of his catch upside on DraftKings. On FanDuel, people won't be that intrigued by it because of the half-point PPR, but Samuels has 5 to 6 catch upside, and at 4,000, it's a pretty good price. So I think that's the one outlier. But if James Conner is active, I think people are going to go one of those two builds. I think that they're either going to go Cook or McCaffrey, or one of Cook and McCaffrey and Chubb and Josh Jacobs.
Yeah,
I really do.
Which may mean that in GPPs, especially if you're multi-lineupping, you want to sort of flip the script on that and maybe go low at running back and higher at receiver potentially to just mix it up, because I think a lot of people are going to go heavy on those running backs.
I wouldn't avoid those running backs.
Don't avoid them necessarily, but
you don't have to go both, right? You could throw in some other guys and look at ownership projections and those types of things. But I think the top end of the receiver board should be pretty low owned.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, let's hear about your tight ends. It sounded like Fant was one of your guys on your list. Tell me
he
more.
was. Fant had a season high 8 targets and 82% of the snaps last week, first game without Emmanuel Sanders. So they're going to kind of use him as a quasi slot receiver, it looks like. Of course, we don't know what Brandon Allen's going to do there, but I agree the price makes him safe. The opportunity makes him safe. I like the Dallas Goedert call. He hasn't played fewer than, I think, 64% of the snaps in any of the last 5 weeks. So he is on the field. But as a consequence of that, Zach Ertz is under 5K.
He's been so bad.
He's been bad, but my goodness, that's the cheapest I've ever seen him. But again, I'm like Devin, where I don't think I have more than $4,000 to pay for a tight end this week. I'm just not going to do it. So the other ones I'm thinking of on the low end, old reliable Greg Olsen, 3,500. It's not a great matchup, but he's cheapish, and we know he's going to see a handful of targets. The other side of that game, if Delaney Walker is inactive again, Jonnu Smith showed out pretty well last week. I think he had 8 targets, he's 70 yards, got a touchdown, and he's still 38 DraftKings, 55 FanDuel. And Steve has him projected for under 2%, which if we do get the early announcement that Walker's out, that'll go up. But how high is that going to go up? So I think Jonnu Smith is another player we need to look at. And I've made comments on this show about playing old catch and fall tight ends before, and my preference for younger athletic types. So Jonnu Smith, if you're that kind of person, would be preferred over Greg Olsen in that light. One last one I had, for GPP play, and this is, Devin went for the leverage off the Lions' primary wide receivers earlier, but I'll go a different route for that same leverage is TJ Hawkinson. So we saw one big game and we haven't seen anything. So again, it's not the safest of plays, but The Oakland defense allows 75% of their yardage via the pass, which is the fourth highest. They allow 59% of their total points via passing touchdowns, which is the second highest. So it's a great spot, as we have already established, for the Detroit passing game. In Detroit, actually kind of a glitch in the matrix thing here, 75.4% allowed from Oakland yardage, 75.4% gained by Detroit in terms of passing yardage. So kind of a weird thing there that I noticed. And I think, again, it's a great spot for them. And the Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones will be on a lot of rosters for that same reason. So Hawkinson's a nice leverage play there from those guys. Other than that, it is a total punt position this week. I mean, I don't know how you can, feel comfortable with what you're doing and be north of 4,500 at tight end. Safe as Waller is, it just doesn't make me feel safe anywhere else.
Yeah.
One key thing to note about Brandon Allen, his number 2 and number 3 receiving target share at Arkansas last year, Hunter Henry, Jeremy Sprinkle. So it's a guy who's used to throwing to tight ends. Those are the last games that he's actually played. He hasn't played since 2015.
Did they have NFL receivers though, or were those just the best guys?
Drew Morgan was drafted, but
okay. That's still a very good point that I was not aware of. So
dig it. Man. Let's talk defenses, fellas. Please subscribe, hit the bell, give us a thumbs up. Thanks for watching and listening. Devin, tell us, what defense are you playing this week?
Is Dwayne Haskins going to start?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so that's a fair question, and I didn't lead off of that in the quarterback section, but Case Keenum is in the concussion protocol. He was in a limited practice on Thursday, which kind of means like it's uncertain. If Dwayne Haskins starts, I think that makes that Buffalo defense look pretty sweet, right?
Yeah, I think Buffalo's the defense if I mean, poor Dwayne Haskins, right? He came in against the Patriots, and now he potentially might start against the Bills.
Yeah,
they're just wrecking him without even giving him a chance.
Yeah.
So yeah, Buffalo is the team that I'm paying up for if Haskins starts. The other defense that I like, it hurts, but Denver Broncos. Denver at home is a different team, and 2,900 on DraftKings. Baker Mayfield has thrown 74 interceptions this year.
Something around there, yes.
I mean, come on, the guy. He's thrown more interceptions than commercials, and he's done a lot of commercials. But it's like the guy panics if his number 1 or number 2 reads aren't there, and Chris Harris is going to lock up Odell Beckham. So it's a major concern that, for me, I kind of like the Broncos this week.
I thought you were going to say the Browns because they're showing up pretty high on our
what have they done?
DFS lineup optimizer.
They're facing Brandon Allen.
That's what it is. They're facing Brandon Allen.
Brandon Allen's going to throw 25 times.
It's going to be a lot of running. Yeah, play it safe with him.
Which limits your upside because interceptions are more common than fumbles. So
yeah, they'll probably try to slow down the game as well.
And sacks and strip sacks and all that are how you get points. So. Right. Yep, that's true. I mean, we want to face people that are passing. So the argument for Cleveland is if they can get ahead of the game and make Brandon Allen throw, but I feel like that's going to be just kind of a slow, boring game if Denver has its way.
Yeah.
So Buffalo was on my list. The two that are on my list that were not mentioned, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So multiple takeaways in 6 straight games. They're averaging 3.2 takeaways per game over their last 6, which is pretty crazy. It's a lot of takeaways. 4+ sacks in 4 of their games this season. I know Indy is a kind of close to the vest team, but there's something about Pittsburgh at home in certain matchups. They play up to their competition and down to it as well. So that's a team that I think, and they're only 2,400 on DraftKings. So again, if they were in the even anywhere near the Buffalo Bills price, I wouldn't be talking about it. But there's somebody that they're a defense that I'm looking at in either format, really, because of price and because of upside. And then I'm just a sucker for jamming in actual offensive players. So I'm not opposed to the Washington defense here. They have 4, 5, 2, and 3 sacks in their last 4 games, 9 takeaways in their last 5. They're $1,800. It's a free square. Like, just get me a turnover and 2 sacks, and I'll be on my way. Thanks.
Is Buffalo going to throw the ball more than 2 times?
Devin's all about the exaggeration.
Are they going to score? Are they going to score 30 points if they don't? Like, it's 1,800. Like, I don't even need anything. I could just not play a defense.
I know.
And fill up my cap to 48K, and that'd be fine.
I just like teams that throw the ball a little bit more than
I do too, and that's why I've been the one that has recommended the team playing against Houston because Deshaun throws and he takes sacks. But it's not because we target defenses that can't score. That's actually not necessarily the way to do it. But they're so cheap. And I can't get away from like just plugging in offensive players that I'm excited about. So
buying 600 for the Steelers.
All right. Well, I'm glad you agree with that one at least. But yeah, so those are the two that I'm really thinking of because again, just like tight end, it's just hard for me to justify spending up at unpredictable positions this week.
All right, let's talk about stacks, fellas. Devin, I think you already mentioned one of your stacks, the Trubisky to Allen Robinson stack.
Yeah.
Is that your favorite? Do you got some others? What are you thinking?
There's a lot of stacks I like this week.
Yeah.
I like Matthew Stafford to Kenny Galladay. I like Matthew Stafford to Danny Amendola. I like
DJ Hawkinson.
I can't get behind that. His one good game is against Arizona.
I know. Just keep going now.
I'm trying to figure out what to do with the Jets. And I want to stack Sam Darnold with somebody. And I'm not really sure who that person
Robbie.
Because Xavier Howard is out for the year. They've traded away Minkah Fitzpatrick. Is it Demaryius Thomas? I don't think so. It's probably Robbie Anderson. Probably is. So that's a deep one that I don't think a lot of people will have. And then I'm going with it. Gardner Minshew and DJ Chark. So Jackson.
Not on the main slate, but
whatever.
Good
Don't
stuff.
care. Don't care.
Good stuff.
We have people that play all slates.
I know.
Yeah, exactly. If you're playing a slate that includes that London game, make sure you get some Minshew Shark. That sounds like some sort of sushi dish.
Minshew Shark. It does. Good call.
Yeah.
And if you're playing a slate that involves non-main slate games, just play Tom Brady everywhere. Anyways. So
and then Jameis Winston and Godwin.
Yeah. I think the Winston Godwin stack's going to be fairly popular.
It's going to be popular for sure.
Yeah, but that's fine. That's fine.
Okay.
And run DK Metcalf back in that one. Or Lockett, either one. Just game stack. I think that game could be a shootout. May not be.
It could be, though. Yeah, I think that's a good call. What do you think, Ryan?
Yeah, so I had an Oakland stack. I had Derek Carr and either Tyrell Williams and or Darren Waller. And then coming back with, frankly, anyone from Detroit. I think that's a game stack that you might want to look at too. If you look at Steve's projections, everybody in Seattle, Tampa is going to be highly rostered. On a slate we talked about earlier was very low scoring. That's the game people are going to want to be on. So a bit of a game theory thing, and this is blending into parting thoughts. But on a week like this, that's everything is low scoring. You sort of just fade that game and grin and bear it and hope for the best. Because if you're on those guys, you're gonna have to differentiate elsewhere. So that's one. I think the Oakland-Detroit game could shoot out. Neither defense is very good, and both teams move the ball via the pass. And then another leverage stack, because we've done so much talk about Dalvin Cook, is Kirk Cousins and Steph Diggs, and then bringing it back with either Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. That's another game I think is a kind of call it a secondary shootout where everybody's on the Tampa-Seattle. That's one, again, Matt Moore acquitted himself pretty well. I think people were expecting much less on Sunday. And so we still have playmakers on that side of the ball. Minnesota is not quite the elite defense that they used to be. So that's one I think we can do and attack that game, and we might see some back and forth there.
Dig it. Let's go to parting thoughts. Ryan, you kind of led into some of your parting thoughts here. You were saying that kind of pay attention to that second or third highest scoring game instead of necessarily loading up on the top game. I think that's good advice. You got any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, so, I just wrote a few notes here. It's low totals and road favorites. So, hammer the spots you like in cash. and don't be afraid to pay down. To pay down everywhere else, even if it looks ugly. If you know you like it and it's a kind of a short slate on really elite plays, hammer those ones, and then don't be afraid to embrace the home dogs in GPPs. So a lot of times team will go on the road as a short road favorite. They'll disappoint, maybe a letdown game from last week. And then the home dog scores more than them. And so you want to, maybe fade that road team. And then of course, just the game theory one I mentioned earlier, just completely fade the game that everybody will be on and hope the other ones work instead.
Yeah, I like it. Devin, what do you think?
I don't have much. I think that I hope everyone had a safe and happy Halloween. So we're recording this on Halloween night and hope everyone has a good week 9.
Yes, we all hope you have a good week 9. We hope that John Lee gets his power back. It'll probably come right back on as soon as we finish recording. Be sure to ask John lots of questions in the YouTube comments because, he's going to want to, or read John's article if you want to know more of his picks. You can check out all of our content over at footballguys.com. We've got those mid-season subscription deals if you have not subscribed yet. We'll be back next Friday morning with our Week 10 episode on behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester. I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching, and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.